Welcome to the Practical Proficiency Podcast. We've got something real exciting for you today. As you can see, we have a guest. Allison is here, and we are talking today about something that I know you're going to love with the springtime episode, and that is movies, how to do movies in the target language in your world language class. Now, for many of you, I know that Allison needs no introduction, but for those of you who are new to the world language space and have not yet had the joy of interacting with some of mis clases locas, I will say that when I was in the classroom, yours were some of my favorite resources. I'm especially a big fan of like the weekend chat stuff. That was my favorite thing to use. So Allison makes resources and also now is branched into doing professional development for teachers like you who are branching into proficiency-centered ideas. So before we start talking about movies and how you used to use them in your classroom and the trainings that you give now, tell us a little bit about you. Where are you teaching and what does this look like in your world language space?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Devin. So yeah, I'm Allison Wienhold. You might know me as Mis Clases Locas from my blog and resources and professional development. I'm located in Iowa, and my experience has always been as a Department of One secondary Spanish teacher, meaning I have taught grades 7 through 12, but I've always been the only world language teacher in the entire district I've been in both private and public schools in Iowa.
That is a lot of preps. And that I think is one of the reasons why people are so drawn to what you do, because it does translate so well into the Spanish 1, 2, 3, 4. And the cool thing about that too is that you really have created the Spanish program that was at your school.
Yeah, absolutely. All the way, from sometimes exploratory, but for sure, always having all levels of Spanish and really going into programs where I did create them from the ground up, and there really wasn't much there that I really wanted to use that existed before me.
For sure. Now, teachers like that, where you're maybe feeling like you can always feel like you're the Department of One if there's only like 1 or 2 people in your district, or if you really are the Department of One, something that you can be an underutilized resource or something that you really just need sometimes is an incredible target language culture rich movie. But I don't know about you, but I feel like this is something that we talk a lot about in the world language space about how to use them. And it gets kind of treated like a sub activity, but it actually is a powerhouse way to deliver input. So I'm so glad that you're here to clarify all of that for us.
Absolutely. And so that was my experience, like in class, it was only ever used as a sub-plan, and it was always the same film and the only VHS that they had in Spanish. And so it took me a while to realize how much value and input you could find from using films, as well as television programs and even short films as well, if you're not able to use a full-length film in class.
Funny story too. It was like, does anybody else like raise your hand, virtually or in your car right now, if you've ever used like Spanish Extra, like that, like ridiculous movie series or TV series that we all like love to hate to love. My mom right now is taking a Spanish class in college, and like 10 years later, when I saw Extra in my own Spanish class in college and then used it in my classroom, they're still using it. They're still assigning Spanish Extra. Like it will be around forever, I think, for sure. So when you tell your students, or like when they see it in the plans, how do they usually react? Like, oh, what do they do when they know a movie's coming up?
Well, and I feel like it really depends on your situation and if you are overusing films. If you are using a film as more of a special treat, no more than 1 per quarter, and it is most likely tied to your unit or the cultural celebration that is happening, most students are typically excited. But if you do have that apathy, all you have to do is offer, okay, well, the alternative is, we're going to do this packet, or we're going to start on with another unit or another book. And then usually as a group, the students be like, no, we want the movie. So encouraging others to be excited in the fact that they get to do something most likely that's a little bit different than routine, different for the students, but also different for the teacher. It does give you not necessarily a break, but it gives you a little time where you don't have to be the one providing the input all the time.
Yeah, that's so nice too, because if input is the driving force in class and you're trying to do more of that, it's exhausting. It feels so often like you have to dance on a table in order to get people to pay attention to your input, or even to just, even if it's not that interesting, to make sure people can understand it. So it is nice. It's nice to be, you know what, I'm going to put on a movie and we're going to listen to what they're saying for once. That feels great.
For sure.
So when that time comes and you're ready to put on a movie and introduce it to your students, you're doing that once a quarter thing. I know the number one thing that I always struggle with is, how do you introduce it without making it feel a lot like we're going to turn this movie into we're going to turn it into a book. How do you do that?
I think that not introducing films was a big mistake that I had made early on, when you just press play and start it and you realize there's so much back end that could help, especially in, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is introducing the characters in the target language with pictures has become a game changer. Mm-hmm. So I just put together basic slideshow that has pictures of the characters, their name, and then you can already have a little description. And this can really vary depending on the level. Your novice level, practice exactly what you're wanting to do. Like, her name is this. She is this many years old. She lives here. She is the sister of this person. So it can be super basic or it can be deeper. But definitely having that visual. So then once students watch the film, they already feel connected. They don't feel so lost, especially if you're using it in the target language. That's already a big thing that's going to kind of throw them off. But if they already feel a little more secure and, oh, here are the main characters, and I already know how they relate to each other, you already maybe even have a little heads up on who is dating whose mom is who. And so that way it's not so overwhelming. Also, watching the trailer for sure before the film can really help. And you can do this in a lot of different ways. You can have them just watch the trailer in the target language. You can watch the trailer in the common language. You could use it in more of where you're describing what's happening in it. And along with that, you could have students make predictions based on these trailers of what they think is going to happen, and then come back to that and see if they are correct in what actually does happen. But I would say those are my two biggest ways to introduce the film, is using a trailer, and also using introducing the characters.
I wish that I had asked you this while I was still teaching, because that would have made my movie experiences so much easier. Because the things that I used to do would be like, I would go and run and ask the English teachers, like, how do you introduce a movie? And they would always give me great ideas, but it would never actually help with the overwhelm that you talked about when you are, you're throwing students into the deep end with a target language movie. But it's not a bad thing. Like, sometimes they need to dip their toes in. But if they already, like you said, have those, they don't have to figure out how the characters are related to each other. They already have a little bit of a sense of security with that movie trailer of, I don't need to figure out what's happening, the general gist. I can at least, I know that I'm going to be going into a sci-fi movie. I know that I'm going into an animated feature film where there's going to be kids, that are running around in the 1600s. I know what's happening with that. I can just start focusing on. Then maybe what the magic result will be that we're all looking for is maybe they can start paying attention to some of the language that's happening and some of the cultural subtleties that we want them to pick up on. Such good ideas. I like too how that you're using the visual, because the whole point of a movie is to be something different, that they're getting a different media, something that's truly from the native speaker's perspective too. So the visual is a really good idea.
And I've learned that because I'm a super visual learner. And so you can describe something all day, but if I don't have a picture of who that person is to be able to then, when I'm watching, know exactly who that is, I've learned that that really helps. And there's a lot of students as well, even projecting what you're going to say about them, especially for novice students. So they're seeing the words in addition to hearing them. And that goes along with also deciding when you're watching a film, what audio and subtitles you're going to use. And so I think that it really depends on what your goals are. And if you as the teacher are going to be there the whole time to be able to support them. And if you are not going to be there as the teacher, if you do have a substitute, I would really suggest using the subtitles in English, because they're not going to have somebody to help clarify meaning, and also using English with the novice students as well. But you might be able to use the target language subtitles if you are there supporting them, being able to pause, check for clarification as well.
Ooh, smart. That's because that's always a question that teachers are wondering is like, does this still count if there's going to be subtitles, or what should I do with this? And yeah, like, of course it does. But, you know, we all know like what happens when the subtitles are on, like there's not as much language going on. But at that point, like you need somebody there for a clarification, because, you know, we know exactly what's going to happen if it's novice students and the subtitles are in French, like phone under desk all day. Like you're going to lose the whole point of the lesson. Also, that was also something that was always in the back of my mind whenever I'm putting on a target language movie, because, you know, in other classes, like movie day is nap time, is phone time. So just coming off the top of my head, what are some things that you would do in your classroom to make sure that, like, let's avoid that at all costs? Like, this is a learning opportunity. This is a moment that you are focused in on what's happening on screen.
I think I had like the phone caddy, which I know, I mean, many students hate, but if I'm doing it as the opportunity, I'm giving you the opportunity to have a break from your phone. There's chargers over there. They need to be in their spots. They're safe. Nobody's going to touch them. And then that way it gives the students the opportunity to be engaged in class and engaged in what is happening, and giving them a break from the phone and be able to enjoy a film and be able to be immersed in it without the constant notifications and distractions. And for students who do need a little more guidance, having, a piece of paper, a worksheet that has some questions along the way in chronological order, especially for example, Squirrely Middle School students who just they need a task to do, or for students who it just helps them to understand and check for comprehension kind of along the way. You don't have to have something like that, but I would highly recommend if you do, it's on paper, because once again, if it's on a screen, then now you're opening up other tabs and you're distracted and not really paying attention to the film.
And what are the things that you as the teacher are doing? You mentioned that if this is an activity where you are in the room with the students during the movie, what are some of the things that you're doing to help go for clarification? What is that? Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Yep. So it really, once again, depends on how much time you're giving to this. Do you have a lot of time, or is this more of just, okay, we're going to watch this film in one block or in just a couple regular class periods? But if you do have time, and so for example, when I'd used the film Canela in Spanish 1, and it's related to food. It's set in Mexico City, and Kara Jacobs had shared a lot of great resources about this film. And I had used this film like after a food unit, but for an entire week. So this is in Spanish 1. We're stretching the film out over a week. So we had introduced the characters, introduced the vocabulary, introduced what was going to happen, watched a little chunk of film, and then maybe only even 10 minutes, and then having a specific time that you're going to pause and talk about what happened, and maybe review what happened, maybe even do some more like discussion over it, and also maybe introduce the next portion that you're going to watch, introduce what's going to happen, and then watch that section, and then just kind of repeat this, as well as when you start class the next day, reviewing what happened, whether you're just doing out loud, or maybe you're doing a technology game like a Quizlet or a quizzes or something to start class, to kind of review what happened and then move in, introduce, watch a little bit more, and just kind of continue throughout, and giving them a lot more input. If you have that time to kind of spread out and use a film a little deeper, discussing more of what's happening, then you can get into more of the cultural things and what did you see? What did you wonder? What do you think about that? Your predictions, all of that.
There's a lot to unpack there, because there's several ways that you could do this. If you're like listening to this and you need a movie like next week, you could you roll the movie, you have some activities to go with it. And on the fly, when you notice that your students are having some moments, you just pause the video. You're like you're doing the same things that you would doing if they're struggling with a reading, I'm imagining from what you're saying.
Yeah.
And if you have some more, like I call it beta, like with my Practical Proficiency Network members, it's like we're trying to get the B- lesson quality out there and then add on it and build on it for later years. So the first year you do it, you try that, you see if students like the movie. And then next year, why reinvent the wheel? Use the same movie and add some more resources to your toolkit. Maybe make some new things, take some screenshots, maybe even make some kind of clip chat moments out of it if you want to, and break it up over a couple days. That could be phase 2. And then phase 3, you could make a sort of mini unit out of it if you wanted to. But there's a lot of different ways from what you're saying that you could either make it this is a one-day thing, or if you wanted, you could extend it out to this is a full movie unit that we're going to, like I used to teach block classes. So I'm thinking that I would have done like 10 minutes each day if possible. Oh,
and that is a great way if you're not allowed to watch a full movie. I know people who have broken up films as a part of their lesson over a week or even more than a week because you're doing it in little pieces, as well as, especially on a block, that part of your class, you're watching a film or a show, and then you're going in and doing a different activity, a different unit that maybe is related. And hopefully, that's a really great way is I like pairing films with novels or pairing films with units as then something as a comparison or a cultural companion to be able to see another side, to be able to get a different perspective and get a visual as well.
Oh, awesome. So what are some good pairings that you've seen work well, for example, with Spanish too?
Okay, so the film Ferdinand, which is set in Spain, about a bull, and pairing it with the book by Carrie Toth, Bianca Nieves, which is also set in Spain relating to bullfighting. And so pairing those. So it's not the same story. It's not like when the English teachers show the movie after the book. Obviously, it's not the same story, but it works really well that we'd read the book, watch the film, and then do a speaking or writing assessment after, where they're comparing and contrasting. They're chatting about the different, actually in both of them, the bull is named Ferdinand. And so they can really, and to add another layer, you could also add in the short film Ferdinand, the Disney short film from the 30s. And there's like a whole bunch of different Ferdinands you could compare and contrast there.
Oh, well, Ferdinand moments. Yeah. I like that. There you go.
Another option would be like the book Felipe Alou about the baseball player, and then pairing it with the documentary Pelotero, which is about more current Dominican players and kind of the current process of recruiting for the MLB versus how it happened kind of in the 50s, 60s in the book. So just to kind of see different perspectives of, also it gives students a visual of the Dominican Republic. And yeah, just something else. I like to do that film actually before the book. So it kind of depends on if you're wanting to introduce a place or if you're wanting to just use it as a companion with another unit.
Oh, smart. Those are really good ideas because then, with topics like that, it's always better to go deep rather than wide. Like if you're doing a unit on the Dominican Republic, you're never going to be able to cover it all. Why not focus in on pelotero culture and everything about it? And because Dominicans are, they're so into it. That's where I studied abroad. And you better believe we went to some baseball games. But that would be such a cool unit to do. And you could see like a really multifaceted approach to it with using movies and books. Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah.
When you are working with a movie, and so there are probably some moments with things like that where you probably want to dive deep into some cultural content. How do you decide when it's right to, hey, let's focus on, it's going to be difficult to phrase this question, but I know this is something that a lot of world language teachers struggle with when it comes to culture, is they want to talk about all the interesting things about that culture, and not necessarily like teach culture, because you can't teach culture, but help students discover things about culture. And they want to really get to the good, juicy stuff that you might only be able to do with novices in the L1. How do you handle that when you've got this movie that's got all this great cultural content that just might not be quite available for your Spanish 1s, your Spanish 2s, etc.? Like, do you talk about it with some input stuff? Do you pair it with some books, or do you just talk about it in English? What are your thoughts on that?
I think, once again, it really depends on your goals, and it really depends on how much time you have to work with, and knowing if this is, it just depends on how much. If your goal really is digging deeper into the culture of this film, then for sure make time to talk about it. Make time to introduce some of the things they may see. So then while they're watching the film, maybe they could even check off for some of these different things like, oh, I saw that as a part of it that we had discussed, and then bring that up. But maybe also that you're just leaving time that you're allowing students, if they have a question about different things, to jot it down. If you're not able to stop and talk about it right then, make sure that you do reflect, let them ask those questions, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's in a group of maybe different, especially things that they had questions about that film. And once again, it just depends on if because you can take all the time in the world to talk about it, but it depends if you actually have that time to devote to it in class.
And one of the most powerful things that we can do with helping students expand their cultural zone of awareness really is reflection. And that is something that they can do independently at times, especially after a film, because you never know what they're going to pick up on and what they're going to find as new and different for them.
Yes, that would be a great exit ticket after they watch. What are some new to you things that you saw, new to you words, maybe words you did recognize, all kinds of different things you could do with that.
Mm-hmm. And so we know that you're the queen of repurposing things across multiple preps, with being the creator of a program here. What would you do if you needed to use a movie for multiple preps? How does that work?
So once again, it depends. So if you know that, for example, when the film Coco came out and it was new and everybody wanted to use it. And so it wasn't a film that I knew I was using with a certain book and a certain level. And I knew that all classes were going to use it around the Day of the Dead. And so I used the same film in all of my levels, got to watch it, but with varying levels of introduction. For example, we spent a really long time introducing the characters in the target language in Spanish 1 versus in Spanish 3. I'm pretty sure we just watched the trailer in Spanish and then watched the film. So there's kind of a lot of different things you can do with it, as well as different things with follow-up. For example, if you know you're wanting to tie in a lot about family because you're teaching a family unit, so you're spending time discussing the family tree and who's related to who. Whereas if you're just watching it for the cultural aspect, maybe in the upper levels, they're spending time noticing and reflecting on all the different elements of the celebration that they have learned about for the last couple of years, and reflecting on that and some deeper things, depending on what level the students are at. And also using different audio. So as I mentioned, using the Spanish audio with all, but having subtitles for the upper levels to be in Spanish, but for the lower levels in English. And at the time, I think I was also teaching an exploratory class. So that class watched the film in English, and we discussed the cultural components of it because it was I think maybe their first week of class, second week of class, because they only had it for a quarter.
Oh, exploratory. Yeah. What an adventure exploratory always is. With your students, when they graduate, it's always like a little mini graduation when they get to Spanish 3. How do they react when you tell them los subtítulos serán en español esta vez? Like, how do they react to that?
At least with mine, we had started at the second semester of Spanish 2 watching authentic television programs on Fridays. And with those, a lot of times I started, for example, when we watched El Internado, Laguna Negra from Spain, we started that in the end of Spanish 2. And with those, the subtitles were only available in Spanish. And so we really broke it down. Mike Pito had really great resources to teach about that show. And we only watched it in 10-minute increments with Spanish subtitles. But because we did so much input of describing what's happening and pausing and discussing, that was kind of their introduction to Spanish subtitles. And I think the biggest thing is being willing to pause and discuss and clarify and allowing students to tell you when they don't understand and to actually listen to them and pause and discuss. Because if they know you're not going to stop it for anything, then they will just shut down and forget and not pay attention anymore. But if they really want to know, giving that opportunity to pause and discuss.
That feels like the ticket there, because once they feel overwhelmed, they will shut down. And
Absolutely.
like students, the students that we have nowadays more than ever, their capacity is like they're already at max right now. So if you add any more overwhelm, like is gone. That's a really good idea for honestly just anything, is that if you feel that they're like if the room is wandering, pause, slow down, try again, or pause, slow down, clarify, rephrase. Like that is the magic. That's the golden ticket with any kind of input, really. And it's a good reminder for movies too.
Absolutely.
So once you get maybe to the end of your 10-minute clip, or if you've done a whole block of a movie day, what does a follow-up activity look like? We've talked a little bit about some exit tickets, but what have been some things that have worked well for you for follow-up?
If you don't have a lot of time, but you do need, for example, you need to put something in the grade book. We need some kind of little assessment over the film. I've found it works well, especially if you had spent time before introducing characters, just doing like a quick character matching quiz where they're just matching the people and some, like a basic description of them. That could be with pictures or it could not be with pictures. And that, it's a way for them to kind of show what they know, they did understand, or it could just be some basic questions about the film, or maybe it's a reflection of the film that they get to write, whether you're wanting it in the target language or you're wanting their honest reflection or cultural reflection in English. Those are a great way to do, like, if you only have a limited amount of time. If you have more time, there was a time that I was gone. So I used, and this was once again with the film Coco, this was later, I had used it, Spanish 1 watched it with a sub, and I came back and I was being observed that Monday after having a sub. And so I was really hoping that they watched the film. But I also wanted to make sure that this activity could work if somebody was gone as kind of a review. And so I had gotten this idea from Meredith White and her idea of an everyday IPA. So using interpretive and interpersonal and presentational all in the same class period. This was like a 50-minute class. So we did each one of those for 15 minutes. So the students had an interpretive infographic related to the film, about the film, that they were doing some basic novice tasks with finding cognates, finding some things they knew from it, interpreting meaning from it. Then they had 15 minutes of interpersonal, where I had question cards already made, which were just questions about the film. And so that way they had that support that they could ask and answer questions if they could come up with them, but this was Spanish 1. So the question cards really helped support them, and, just basic questions in the target language, like, who is this person? Did you like the film? Where did they go? Who did you see? Just basic questions so they could kind of chat about the film. And then they just did a free write about the film in the target language. And so that was 15 minutes of each task. And even if it was a kind of way to wrap up the film, but even if somebody wasn't there, it was kind of a review of what happened. They were still able to participate in it. And if you needed, you could grade the interpretive task and the presentational task if you needed a grade for the grade book.
That's so beautifully simple. And it's pretty minimal prep too. And you could use it across lots of different activities as well. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, all you needed was just an infographic related for that. And then that was all. And then they did that. And the backside was just a free write. So it was one piece of paper for that.
Oh, what a good idea. What a good way to turn that genius idea of Meredith into a movie activity. I love that. I bet you your administrator loved it, even if they didn't say it.
It did go well. It
Good.
It went well.
Okay. So we did talk about this a little bit at the beginning, but like to bring it full circle, you're now working with lots of teachers in districts in professional development, and we'll be talking about this too at the end of this episode, that if you're catching this in the springtime, that you have an amazing conference coming up that we have to recommend that everybody goes to. So with all of the world language teachers that you see using movies, what do you see is like the mistake that you wish you could, like, hey, don't make this one, go the other way?
I think the biggest mistake is picking a film that does not have a cultural connection. Because if you are spending this amount of time on something, you want it. There are so many culture-rich films that now are so easily accessible online. It used to be, you had to rent or buy and get these VHSs in another language. Now you can get movies and shows, online. So many different opportunities that you can buy, rent, get different films. And so I think that is the mistake, is, find something that is in a country of the language you teach, created by that culture, with real people, some kind of cultural connection. And then you'll get so much more out of it. And not just the language. Now you are getting the culture, you're getting authentic perspectives. And so I think that's the biggest mistake, is there are so many great films out there. I have curated a ton of great films for Spanish teachers. I know there's other lists out there for other languages, but pick a film that has some kind of connection, and not just do El Rey León, The Lion King. That was the movie that I grew up every time there was a sub. It was The Lion King, which did not connect to our classes.
No, and like we've done it. Like I definitely used to show the on the day before winter break, when there's only half your students in, well, at least in my school district, like attendance was always an issue anyways. So then in my school district, like, yeah, you better believe, like on the day before break, like we're showing The Grinch in French because it's funny and only half the kids are there anyways. But like when it comes time to talk about your units that you're planning, like Le Petit Prince, like there's so many easily accessible movies that are made by target language members of that target culture, and that are like they are. I remember the days when I used to, oh my gosh, have you done this? I've done this, where you order a movie or a DVD off of Amazon from the target culture and it's the wrong size and you like can't even put it in the DVD player. I've done that at least 3 times, but that's not an issue anymore with streaming services. You really can. There's a lot of good stuff that you have access to. So
but make sure before you buy, when you do rent, because that's the problem sometimes is some of the online, check the languages provided. Yeah. Because in a DVD, it usually has multiple languages. But sometimes, for example, if you buy a movie from Amazon, you need to make sure you're buying not the English version, but you're buying a target language version. Just something to check.
Do check. Please do check. Yeah. And that the shipping won't take 6 weeks, like what happened to me. But where can teachers go to find this list of movies so that they don't have to do the research themselves? Because I know that you've already done it.
Yes. So on misclaseslocas.com, and I'll give it to Devin so she can include it in the show notes. I have all kinds of resources related to specific movies for Spanish class. So lots of appropriate movies, because I've also made that mistake of not previewing films and picking films that are a little questionable to use in class.
It's a movie. It happens. What can you do? They'll have something fun to talk about at lunch. They'll be fine. Just, please, no emails. But when it comes to movies, there's so much that you can do now that you have a lot of resources and ideas to work off with just this podcast. And if you want to learn more about all of the aspects that Allison has to teach you, you can actually go hang out with her in person. Tell us about the conference that you have coming up.
Yes. So everyone is welcome to, it's called Comprehensible Iowa, June 7th and 8th. It will be held in Gilbert, Iowa, which is outside of the Des Moines metro. Everyone is welcome. We would love to have you here. We'll have our keynote is the great Kia London, and there'll be lots of amazing teachers and vendors and prizes. We also have some scholarships available. So please reach out to me. I'll give Devin a link for that as well, but reach out to me if you have any questions. And we would love to see you at Comprehensible Iowa so you can learn and grow together with like-minded people all together in person.
Yes, excellent. It's so important to invest in your community. If you can, hit up your administrator for that conference ticket and the scholarship. We would absolutely love to see you at a community event for proficiency, especially with Allison. Thank you so much for being here and teaching us all about movies. This was great. I know I wish I had this while I was still in the classroom, and it's going to serve a lot of people. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Devin. It's always great to chat with you.
Yay! All right, y'all. We're signing off for now, but we will see you again soon.